Hello friends, please join me as I narrate my story of how my ex-husband's plan of humiliating me on his wedding day with his mistress turned out to be the most shocking day of his life just by my arrival at the venue. Before I dive into the main story, please kindly hit the subscribe button, like and share this video with your loved ones. And I would love to know where you are watching this from. Thank you. Your support means the world to me. Now to my story. My name is Sarah Davies and I am 41 years old. If you had met me 2 years ago, you wouldn't recognize me now. Back then, I was a woman stripped bare by betrayal, clinging to the remains of a marriage I thought would last forever. Mark Evans, my husband of 6 years, decided one spring afternoon that he'd found something better. Her name was Chloe Green, 10 years younger than me, fresh-faced and eager to take the role I had been playing. The day he left, he didn't even have the decency to soften the blow. "Sarah, you've changed. I need someone who keeps things exciting," he'd said, leaning casually against the kitchen counter as if he were discussing the weather. I stood there with a coffee cup in my hand, numb, wondering how a man could dismantle an entire life with such a lazy choice of words. The humiliation didn't end with him walking out. Small towns have big mouths, and even though we lived in an upscale neighborhood outside London, word spread fast among our circle. Friends we dined with stopped calling. Acquaintances offered pitying smiles at the grocery store. I hated their sympathy almost as much as I hated Mark's smugness. Chloe wasted no time moving in with him, wearing the jewelry I had picked out for our anniversaries, and posting carefully curated Instagram shots in my favorite vacation spots. There's nothing quite like watching your replacement parade around in your old life. It burned, and I let it burn because anger can be fuel if you know how to use it. The first few weeks after the divorce were the worst. I'd wake up and feel as if my chest were caving in. I stopped wearing makeup, stopped returning calls, stopped looking in mirrors. But one night, Anna Carter, my best friend since college, sat me down and told me flat out, "Sarah, this is not your ending. This is your rebirth." She had that no-nonsense tone she always used when she was about to save me from myself. That conversation flipped a switch. I started small, getting back to the gym, eating food that nourished me instead of numbing me. I hired a trainer named Sophia who didn't tolerate excuses. At first, I could barely jog a mile, but months later, I was running 5 with ease. My clothes began to fit differently. My posture straightened. And one morning, I caught my reflection in a shop window and realized I was coming back. Physically, the changes were obvious, but inside I was building something deeper. I signed up for an executive marketing course I'd been putting off for years. By the time I finished, I had offers from 2 prestigious firms, and I chose one that gave me the freedom to travel. For the first time in years, my passport filled with stamps: Italy, Greece, France. With each trip, I rediscovered pieces of myself Mark had worn down. It was in Milan of all places that I met Michael Bennett. Michael, tall, sharp suit, the kind of presence that fills a room without trying. He was speaking at a tech conference and I was there on a project. We ended up at the same dinner table and conversation flowed effortlessly. Unlike Mark, Michael actually listened. By the end of the night, he'd asked if he could see me again. And by the end of the month, we were inseparable. Michael didn't just love me. He respected me. He noticed the little things. How I took my coffee. How I tucked my hair behind my ear when I was thinking. He didn't flinch at my scars, emotional or otherwise. With him, I wasn't rebuilding to prove anything to anyone. I was simply living. Still, there were moments when I thought about Mark and Chloe. Not with longing, but with a detached curiosity. Last I heard, they were living in a loft downtown, attending charity galas and posting every moment online. From the outside, it was the picture of success. But I knew Mark well enough to guess he was still chasing the next thrill, never content with what he had. One crisp autumn afternoon, nearly 18 months after the divorce, I walked past a boutique and saw a gown in the window. Midnight blue floor-length sequin, just enough to catch the light without being gaudy. I stepped inside, tried it on, and felt a quiet power settle over me. I didn't know then why I bought it, only that one day it would serve its purpose. I'd gone from a woman who could barely face the world to someone who could walk into any room and hold her own. People who had once whispered about my downfall now wanted to know my secrets. My secrets were simple. I refused to stay broken. I invested in myself. And I never forgot the face of the man who thought I'd crumble. I didn't see Mark for nearly 2 years. His absence didn't bother me. Life was full. My career was thriving. And Michael and I were planning a future together. But fate has a way of circling back when you least expect it. And sometimes it hands you the perfect stage. That stage would arrive in the form of an envelope, one that carried a familiar handwriting and an invitation that would test just how far I'd come. The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, tucked between a stack of work documents and a package I'd ordered from Paris. I almost tossed it aside without looking, but the handwriting stopped me cold. Mark's handwriting, slightly slanted. All caps for the recipient's name. My first thought was that he wanted something. My second was that I didn't care. Still, curiosity is a tricky thing. I slid a finger under the flap and unfolded a heavy cream card embossed in gold. You are cordially invited to celebrate the wedding of Mark Evans and Chloe Green. The date was 2 months away. The venue, a country estate just outside of Bristol. I stared at the words, half expecting them to rearrange into something less absurd. There was a handwritten note at the bottom. Thought you might want to see how it's done, right? My jaw tightened. This wasn't just an invitation. This was a performance staged for my humiliation. Mark wanted me there. Wanted me to witness his version of happily ever after. While remembering how I'd been discarded, I let the card rest on the counter for a long time. Part of me considered tossing it straight into the trash, cutting off the power he thought he had over me. But another part, the part that had rebuilt herself from nothing, felt something sharper. Not rage exactly, something quieter, more deliberate. I realized I wasn't upset. I was amused. That evening, Michael came over. I was curled on the sofa, the invitation balanced on the coffee table. He noticed it immediately. "Who's getting married?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Mark and Chloe," I said, watching his face. He picked it up, read the smug little note, and raised an eyebrow. "And he sent this to you?" "Oh, he sent it to me on purpose," I replied. "This isn't an olive branch. It's a show." Michael studied me for a moment, a slow smile forming. "Then let's make sure the audience gets more than they bargained for." That's one of the things I love about Michael. He never feeds my ego recklessly, but when he sees an opportunity for me to stand tall, he's right there beside me. We spent the next hour tossing ideas back and forth. Should we go? Should we ignore it? Somewhere between sipping wine and watching the sunset through my window, the plan took shape. We weren't just going to attend. We were going to arrive. I pictured it immediately. The two of us stepping out of a car that made heads turn, wearing clothes that silenced a crowd. No drama, no public scene, just a presence so undeniable that it shifted the entire atmosphere of their perfect day. The following weekend, Michael arranged for us to visit a high-end tailor in London. While he was being measured for a midnight black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped off the cover of a magazine, I wandered into a section of evening gowns. My fingers found a dress that made me stop breathing for a second. Champagne silk, fitted at the waist with a subtle shimmer that caught the light like water at sunset. The neckline was daring but not vulgar. The train long enough to glide without tripping. I slipped into it in the fitting room and turned toward the mirror. The woman staring back at me didn't look like someone's ex-wife. She looked like someone who wrote her own story. When I stepped out, Michael's expression told me everything I needed to know. "That's the one," he said softly. We left the store with garment bags over our shoulders, a quiet giddiness between us. It wasn't about Mark anymore. It was about walking into a place where I'd once been defined by someone else and proving, without words, that I'd outgrown the entire narrative. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, life went on as usual. I worked on a campaign launch for a luxury brand, met friends for dinners, and went on weekend trips with Michael. But every so often, I'd glance at the date on my calendar and feel that spark of anticipation. Anna caught me smiling at my phone one afternoon and asked what I was up to. When I told her, she laughed so hard she had to set down her coffee. "Oh, this is going to be delicious," she said. "Promise me you'll take pictures." I promised nothing. Pictures weren't necessary. I wasn't doing this for keepsakes. I was doing it for the moment itself. The split second when Mark would realize I was no longer the woman he'd left behind. 2 nights before the wedding, Michael took me to dinner at a quiet rooftop restaurant. The city glowed beneath us, and the air was just cool enough for me to wrap his jacket around my shoulders. "Are you nervous?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not even a little. I just want to walk in, make the point, and walk out." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." The morning of the wedding, I woke to sunlight streaming across the bed. My gown hung in its bag by the closet. Michael's tuxedo beside it. In a few hours, we'd be stepping into a scene Mark thought he controlled. He had no idea we were about to rewrite it entirely. The drive to Bristol felt like the prelude to a film, the kind where you know the best scene is waiting just beyond the next turn. The sky was clear, the rolling hills glinting in the distance, and Michael was at the wheel of the Rolls-Royce Phantom he'd arranged for the day. Its polished black surface reflected the world like a mirror. We weren't rushing. We didn't need to. The power was in knowing we could arrive exactly when we chose. Inside the car, everything was quiet but charged. My gown lay across my lap in a sweep of champagne silk, the fabric cool against my skin. Michael glanced over, his hand brushing mine briefly on the center console. "Ready?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. I smiled, calm and steady. "More than ready." The country estate came into view like something out of a glossy magazine. Sprawling green fields, whitewashed barns turned into event spaces, rows of cars neatly parked by valets in crisp uniforms. Even from a distance, I could hear the low hum of music and conversation. Mark had spared no expense. We pulled up to the entrance just as a small group of guests arrived in a modest sedan. Their chatter faltered when they saw our car glide to a stop. One of them leaned toward another, whispering behind a manicured hand. I kept my eyes forward, my breathing slow. The calm wasn't an act. It was the natural result of knowing I'd already won, no matter how the next hour played out. A valet in a navy jacket stepped forward to open Michael's door. He got out with an easy grace, buttoning his tuxedo jacket, then moved around to my side. Through the tinted glass, I could see faces turning toward us. Cameras and phones were already being lifted. Inside, the reception was in full swing. I knew because I'd overheard fragments from the open doors. Chloe's laughter, bright but forced. Mark's voice pitched slightly too high as he greeted guests. They had no idea we were only a few steps away. Michael offered his hand to help me out, but I didn't move right away. For a moment, I simply looked at him, tall, composed, the picture of confidence. He wasn't just my partner in life. He was my partner in this moment, the one who understood exactly what this was about. I took his hand and stepped out. The sunlight caught the gown instantly, making it shimmer like liquid gold. My hair, styled in soft waves, moved gently in the breeze. I didn't need to look around to know we had the full attention of everyone within view. The air shifted. I could feel it. We walked slowly toward the entrance. The sound of our footsteps on the stone path somehow louder than the music inside. My heels clicked with measured precision. Michael's arm warm against mine. People weren't whispering anymore. They were openly staring. A few smiled, clearly impressed. Others, I guessed, were already texting inside to announce our arrival. At the doorway, a coordinator with a clipboard paused mid-sentence when she saw us. "Welcome," she said, her voice tilting up into a question. Michael gave a polite nod. "Thank you. We're here for Mark Evans's wedding." Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe, or the shock of connecting my name on the guest list to the reality standing in front of her. She stepped aside quickly. Inside, the room was awash in white flowers and twinkling lights. Tables draped in linen surrounded a central dance floor where Chloe was in the middle of greeting guests. Her gown was beautiful, no denying that. But I noticed the way her eyes darted toward the entrance when the first murmurs began. Mark was at the bar, laughing with someone from his office. He turned to see what had captured the room's attention, and in that instant, his face changed. The laughter drained away, replaced by a stiffness around his jaw. He blinked once, then again, as if the image in front of him might rearrange into something else if he looked long enough. I didn't speed up, didn't slow down. Michael and I kept the same pace, moving through the crowd as conversations dipped into silence. Every step was deliberate, not for show, but for control. This wasn't about storming in. It was about arriving like we belonged there, more than belonged there. When we reached the edge of the dance floor, I glanced at Chloe. Her smile held, but her eyes had gone sharp, calculating. She turned slightly toward Mark, her hand brushing his arm in a subtle attempt to ground him. But I saw it, the flicker of uncertainty she couldn't quite mask. Michael leaned in just enough for me to hear. "They're already unraveling." I gave the smallest smile. "We're just getting started." The music swelled for a moment, as if the band sensed something in the air. Guests shifted in their seats, angled their bodies for a better view. My heartbeat was steady. The calm before the storm wasn't about waiting for the storm to come. It was about knowing you are the storm, and they just haven't realized it yet. Michael and I reached the center of the room as if the space had opened for us. It wasn't arrogance. It was physics. People naturally stepped aside when they sensed something worth watching. The light from the chandeliers caught my gown, scattering gold across the floor. Every movement of the silk was like a ripple over water. Mark stood frozen near the bar, one hand gripping a glass he'd forgotten to drink from. His eyes locked on me, then flicked to Michael, then back to me. It was the look of someone who'd been bracing for a casual encounter, but instead got hit with a tidal wave. Michael broke the silence first. With the perfect balance of charm and volume, he addressed the nearest cluster of guests. "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Bennett and this is my fiancée, Sarah Davies." The word fiancé landed like a dropped champagne flute. Heads turned. A few audible gasps slipped out. Someone at the back whispered, "Sarah Davies as in," and didn't finish the sentence. They didn't have to. Chloe's smile twitched. It was so slight most people would miss it, but I'd spent enough time studying social cues to recognize the microfracture. She glanced at Mark, who still hadn't moved. His fingers tightened around the glass until I half wondered if it might shatter. Michael continued, completely at ease. "We're actually flying to Paris next week for our engagement party, but when we received Mark's thoughtful invitation, we couldn't resist coming to wish them well in person." It was a masterclass in civility, the kind of line you couldn't object to without revealing the tension beneath. Polite words, perfectly neutral tone. But everyone in the room heard the undercurrent. This wasn't just a visit. This was a statement. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My silence was part of the theater. Letting every glance, every shimmer of my gown, every subtle exchange between Michael and me tell the story. I could feel eyes on us from every direction, weighing the difference between the woman Mark had left and the woman standing here now. Chloe finally stepped forward, her voice warm but brittle. "Sarah, how lovely of you to come." I met her gaze evenly. "Thank you. You look beautiful, Chloe." She blinked, clearly unsure whether to accept the compliment or search it for a hidden barb. I left it hanging, turning my attention to the arrangement of flowers beside us. Mark set down his glass and moved closer, the polite smile on his face not quite reaching his eyes. "Sarah," he said, his tone somewhere between surprise and an attempt at control. "This is unexpected." "Life's full of surprises," I replied lightly. "I hear congratulations are in order." For a moment, the room was so quiet I could hear the faint clink of cutlery from the far side. Then someone in the crowd coughed and conversations resumed. Not because the tension had eased, but because people were eager to discuss it in whispers. We stayed for just long enough to be part of the photographs people were already snapping on their phones. Michael ordered us each a glass of champagne, and we stood together, greeting a few familiar faces. The longer we were there, the more Mark's composure thinned. His glances became shorter, sharper, as if trying to assess whether I was enjoying myself and knowing that I was. At one point, I caught sight of Chloe speaking in low tones to a friend, her hand gesturing subtly toward us. I didn't care what she said. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about me walking into a space where they'd expected me to be small and showing them, without a single outburst, that I had outgrown the walls entirely. When Michael finished his champagne, he glanced at me with that unspoken question. "Ready?" I gave the smallest nod. We walked toward the exit, not hurried, not hesitant. People stepped aside again, the air parting like a tide. At the doorway, Michael turned briefly, offering a polite nod toward Mark and Chloe. "We'll let you get back to your day," he said. "Best wishes." Mark's jaw tightened, but he managed a strained, "Thank you." As we stepped outside, the cool air wrapped around us. The Rolls-Royce was waiting, the driver holding the door. Before I got in, I took one last glance at the building. Through the wide glass windows, I could see Mark still standing where we'd left him, staring at the space we just vacated. Chloe was at his side, speaking quickly, her smile gone entirely. I slid into the seat, the door closing with a satisfying cushioned click. Michael joined me, and as the car began to move, he reached for my hand. "You were magnificent," he said. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. No, we were. We didn't need to look back. The wedding had been theirs in name only. For those brief, charged moments, the room had belonged to us. We hadn't been on the road for more than 10 minutes when my phone started buzzing. Michael and I exchanged a knowing look. Neither of us needed to guess who it was. I didn't pick up. Not yet. The first call went unanswered. Then a text arrived. "Mark, Sarah, can we talk, please?" I almost laughed. Please. This from the man who had once told me I'd never find anyone better. I let the message sit unread for a few minutes before locking my phone. Michael, without prying, simply brushed his thumb over my hand. "You don't owe him anything," he said quietly. By the time we reached our penthouse, 2 more texts had come through. "Mark, I shouldn't have invited you. That was a mistake. Mark, you didn't have to show up like that." Like that. I could almost hear the edge in his voice. See the way his jaw clenched when things didn't go according to his script. The irony was delicious. He'd wanted me there to sit in the shadows and watch him parade his new life. Instead, I'd walked in and rewritten the entire scene. Anna called an hour later. "Sarah, you absolute legend. My cousin was at that wedding. She said you and Michael looked like movie stars. Apparently, Chloe's been in the restroom for half an hour crying." I sighed, but it wasn't guilt. "Anna, I didn't go there to hurt anyone. I just needed to remind myself that I'm not the woman they thought I was." She chuckled. "Oh, you reminded them and the whole guest list. That night, as Michael and I sat on the balcony watching the city lights shimmer, another message came through. This one was longer. Mark, I made a mistake letting you go. Seeing you today, I realized what I lost. If there's any part of you that still cares. I didn't finish reading it. I simply deleted the thread. Because here's the thing, his regret wasn't about love. It was about losing control. And I'd learned the hard way that control dressed as affection was nothing I needed in my life again. I leaned into Michael, who wrapped an arm around me. Paris, next week, he asked, a smile tugging at his mouth. Paris, I agreed. And after that, wherever we feel like. I didn't need revenge. I didn't even need closure. I'd already won the moment I walked into that room, head high, with someone who loved me for who I was, not who they could shape me to be. Some battles aren't fought with anger or loud words. Some are won with a gown that glitters, a partner who beams with pride, and the quiet knowledge that you've outgrown the life you once thought you couldn't live without. And Mark, he'd have to live with the image of my arrival forever. The moment his wedding stopped being about him and became the day he realized he was just a chapter in my story. Life has a funny way of circling back. Sometimes the people who thought they buried you will one day have to watch you bloom. My lesson. Never waste energy proving yourself to someone who chose to leave. Instead, pour all that energy into becoming the best version of yourself. Trust me, success, self-respect, and genuine love are louder than any revenge speech you could ever give. So, if your ex invited you to their wedding, what would you do? Would you ignore it, go and cause a scene, or show up looking like their biggest, what if, come to life? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story because somewhere out there, a Mark is planning a wedding and a Sarah is planning her arrival. Thank you for watching. Please kindly stay tuned for the next video. Bye.